We began to recognize in them a strange obsession. After all, they are emotionally inexperienced with only a few years in which to store up the experiences which you and I take for granted. If we gift them with the past, we create a cushion or pillow for their emotions, and consequently we can control them better.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
Cinderella story.
You want answers?
We're on a mission from God.
Inconceivable! Take your sticking paws off me!
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Have fun storming the castle!
Hey everybody, welcome to the Story Cauldron, finding the folktales, fables, and philosophies behind your favorite Hollywood films. I'm Bobby the Movie Dude.
I'm Anthony, the philosophy guy.
And I'm Garrett, and I just try to watch movies.
And this is the podcast where we talk about movies that we love and the stories behind those movies. Just like how Tolkien described in his essay on fairy stories, all of the stories that we tell, they come out of this big mishmash of history and other stories that have come before. And so we might think that we're telling new tales, but we're always depending on the generations that have come before us. So we're looking to understand these movies that, and like today's is one that people love to watch.
And yeah, today we're watching Elon Musk's worst nightmare, debating whether Siri and Alexa deserve to live. It's Blade Runner.
Alexa, upvote the Story Cauldron podcast. No? That won't work?
No, I think it'll work.
Yeah. So what are we talking about?
Okay, so... sorry. Blade Runner. Rick Deckard is a futuristic police officer / bounty hunter tasked with hunting down replicants. Androids so realistic that only a special test can reveal they're not actually human. After getting beaten up by almost every replicant he meets, he manages to retire each one somehow without dying himself, but not before falling in love with one that's really pretty.
Yeah. So had either of you guys seen this movie before?
No.
You know, it's one of those movies that you watched in college. You walk into a room and somebody's got it on, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I'll watch it half-heartedly for a half hour and then go order a pizza or something. But
Story of my life.
Yeah, which it is right now. So, yeah, just very briefly in passing kind of watching.
Oh, I didn't watch it before this. I had no interest. So.
You had no interest at all?
No, I didn't know that it was a thing until you said, we're watching Blade Runner.
Had you at least heard of it? No, you hadn't even heard of it?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
1982. It's a little bit before your time.
Just like 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the most popular, arguably the most famous, one of the most famous science fiction movies of the last 100 years. I mean, it's constantly on lists of best science fiction films, favorite science fiction films. It's often it's on the best films lists too, and it did win a couple of awards. When it came out in the 80s, mainly for cinematography. It did not win any Oscars. It was nominated for a couple, but this was a movie that I had watched, I don't know, at some point. It had been a long time. I rewatched it last night to get ready for this.
So did
this taping.
Me too.
And I mean, I grew up watching Star Trek and Star Wars, and I mean, I love science fiction, but Blade Runner, I don't know. I mean, it's a good movie, don't get me wrong. I appreciate it, but it wasn't one of those movies that I was just in love with, watching over and over and over again. I mean, I like Harrison Ford, but...
I'm more of Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford fan.
Yeah.
So
and Han Solo, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So, so Garrett, you're the one who had the least experience with it. What do you think about it after watching it last night?
What do I think? I don't know what to think because I couldn't make heads or tails of the entire thing. I had to look up the plot on Wikipedia as I was watching it just for it to make sense.
You had no idea?
No.
Oh, and we should make it clear that all three of us ended up watching the theatrical release of this film. So
yeah, because there's like 5 releases.
There's been quite a few. There's been 3 big ones that you can find. But the theatrical release, I will tell you, Garrett, it is the worst.
Oh,
of the three, it is. Well, I'd say it's the worst because in some ways it's actually the easiest to understand, which might make you really hate it even more. I
like things that are easy.
But they really, there are things about it. And it's not, I mean, it's still not that bad. They didn't change a lot from version to version. But that, the voiceover, you know, how Harrison Ford keeps coming in. Yeah, that's taken out in all of the other versions, which immediately makes it better.
Well, I could understand it with being neo-noir, but it was just, I didn't put two and two together at first. I was thinking, God, this sounds so familiar. And then I actually looked it up and went, oh, that's why. Okay, that's why there's narration and voiceover.
So with the help of the synopsis, I mean, if you had to, I don't know, ranking movies is such a strange idea on like a scale. But
yeah, it's difficult.
It is. So like to just put a single number to it is kind of pointless.
Props to the AFI and the Academy for being able to do that. Even if you're wrong sometimes, in my opinion.
Would you rank it? I don't know. Like, how would you have any desire to see this again, Garrett?
Not particularly.
It's because it's so confusing.
It would probably make more sense after I watch it again, but just from watching it the first time, it's not like something that I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to go sit and wait for it to be released at a theater at midnight or anything.
Yeah.
Kind of one of those, I'll wait for it to be on Redbox, if I even want to watch it.
Oh, with the sequel that's coming out, you mean?
Or anything.
Yeah. I'm actually really looking forward to the sequel, especially since I saw the timeline from the first movie to the second movie. I think that it piqued my interest.
Yeah, I'm excited. I was surprised having going back and watching it last night. I don't think I had ever seen the theatrical version before. I think I had probably seen the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the ending just it slays me about it. The whole thing with the after the elevator doors close and then it shows them kind of driving and the pointless video of the helicopter shots of just random nothingness in the wilderness. It just doesn't fit.
So it slays you in a bad way.
In a bad way, yeah.
Okay.
The other ones end just with the elevator doors closing.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a good ending.
It's a much better ending for a couple of reasons that we can get into, but
yeah, I mean, there's actually very few changes, but they make a huge impact. Mm-hmm. I think. And that was just me reading about the different versions. You know, they're like, oh, we tweaked this, we took this out, and holy crap, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I had no idea that there were even different versions or anything like that until Bob brought it up, and I just said, wait, what? Huh?
I have to watch more of these?
I wouldn't
all
go
five.
that far. Maybe just a YouTube video of all the little changes.
Yeah.
Call it good.
So I'm curious, if there was one thing that stands out from the movie, good or bad, what do you think? Like, reflecting on it now.
It's almost 2019. Why do we not have flying cars yet?
Yeah, that's right.
It's another one of those movies with flying cars, and I'm just thinking, why? Why don't we have this technology?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to drive around other people.
Good point.
All four of these replicants have build dates which have already passed now. Like the youngest one was built in April 2017.
And we've just barely been able to create a robot that could kick a soccer ball.
Yeah.
In some ways, I feel like we're behind, but I think we might be behind on purpose after watching these movies.
That it's not necessarily a bad thing.
We're like, we probably could, but we like living.
Well, it's kind of like Back to the Future 2, how there's all the flying cars and stuff, and it's 2015. That time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey,
I would like a hoverboard that doesn't need wheels.
but I was going to say, we have the self-lacing Nike technology.
That's true.
And the Cubs did finally win.
And the Cubs
that's so
finally
true,
won.
too.
We're living in the future, guys. That's basically the point here.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So what? Okay. Let me ask you this: what did you think was creepier, Harrison Ford trying to kiss Sean Young, or
Who is Rachel?
or Rutger Hauer laughing like a hyena in his underwear?
I think it was Harrison Ford trying to kiss Rachel, because the entire time I was thinking, you don't have consent, sir.
That might be the single creepiest
Until
kiss.
she said, kiss me, and then I was like, oh, okay.
But still, at that point, I don't think that would still qualify.
I don't know.
Now, that is the single creepiest kiss I have ever seen in a movie, I think. I can't... but...
It was just creep. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
just move on?
It was
Yeah.
it was creepy. It was creepy. It seems like there's always the bad guys, the good guys, and the dames, right?
The femme fatale.
The femme fatales or the damsel in distress.
In this
Usually the
genre,
same.
at least, yeah.
And I mean, I think that's why we could call it, the neo noir, is because it has the same themes and tropes as the original 1940s through 60s black and white detective films that I know Garrett is so familiar with.
Thanks, college.
But it has a lot of themes that it shares with other sci-fi. It's got, the first ones that come to mind, of course, they're later films, but AI, the boy that's programmed to love, Same thing with, did you guys ever watch that movie, The Island, with the clones?
No, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's
Ewan McGregor, Scarlett Johansson. Yeah.
And it kind of has the same type of questions, like, okay, what's considered actual life and what is, a tool?
Which I have my thoughts on that.
Oh, yeah?
And it's funny because that's not actually one of the big themes in the original book that
Yeah.
Blade Runner was taken from. It says it's loosely based on this Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Which, I mean, there's some really interesting stuff in that book in its own way, but the whole idea of the humanity of the robots, I mean, it kind of gets into that in the book, but not nearly to the same degree that it does in the movie or in these other movies that you're talking about.
I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool. How some of my favorite films, they kind of mesh genres. Just like the episode that we did on "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou." They cross genres, and it's comedy, music, drama, historical fiction.
Yeah. Future historical fiction.
Future historical fiction. It's they. I just love the crossing of genres because film noir in my mind is a film genre, and sci-fi, and then I would say drama as well.
Even just in the soundtrack for Blade Runner, you kind of get this 80s twist on the old, the kinds of not really depressing but kind of somber piano notes, but now it's a synthesizer because it's the 80s, and it's futuristic. So it is this a similar kind of music, but mashed up with this futuristic,
Which
kind of style.
automatically dates it for all of us watching it today.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
Oh, 2019? We went back to the 80s? I guess I can't say much because it seems like the 90s are making a resurgence right now.
So very much.
I think there's a Ready Player One joke in there somewhere.
Oh, totally. Totally. I mean, there's quite a bit of reference to Blade Runner in that book
Right.
also.
So, okay, Garrett, you said you have some you have some thoughts on what qualifies as life.
Oh.
There's a line that Pris says in the movie when she's talking to Sebastian. Pris and Roy Batty. That throws me off because I understand that you have to change things from book to movies, but the things that they change sometimes that make no sense. Like in the book, the main, and he's not even really the main android, but his name is Roy Batty, but it's spelled differently. I don't understand why you need to change that. But anyway, soapbox off. When Roy and Pris are talking to Sebastian, trying to convince him to take them to the owner of the Tyrell Corporation, Pris makes a rather famous comment. She says, "I think, Sebastian, therefore I am." So is that enough? Is that all it takes in order for these machines to be considered alive?
I don't know. I look at it very much. You guys, you're gonna get so annoyed. I recently read a book called All That She Can See by Carrie Fletcher, and it really makes you think about what makes us human. And one of the things that she basically flat out says, which I totally agree with, is what makes us human are our feelings, our different thoughts and emotions that are tied to them. Because if you don't have those feelings, then you would be kind of considered a shell of a human being. If that makes any sense. So you wouldn't be like a human being. You'd just be the shell of. So that's my thoughts on it. If you don't have those feelings, then can you really be a human?
So the androids are not humans because they don't have feelings.
I think that they could think that they have feelings, even though I don't think that they could.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Which is
Throughout the entire thing, it was kind of like, oh, blush response, do this, do this. That's faking it. That's not really having feelings.
That's knowing what you should be doing, but
Posturing.
You're a psychopath. You fake it.
Fake it till you make it.
But yeah, no, and that's what the whole test is about, right? Is engaging emotions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you don't get an emotional response, you're an android.
Yeah, and that's not something that Ridley Scott, the director of the movie, or that Philip Dick, who wrote the book, that's not just something that they were trying to think about. This is something that people in actual life have talked about too. Have you guys heard of Alan Turing? He's got a fascinating story in his own right. He was a brilliant English mathematician and computer scientist in the early 20th century who, it would be a bit of a diversion, but he had a pretty sad ending to his life. To make a long story short, he was essentially murdered. It's a little more complicated than that. It's unclear whether he committed suicide or whether someone else did, but he was arrested for being a homosexual under some rather laws that are so horrible that you can't even hardly believe that they were real. But before he died, he wasn't even 50. Before he died, he worked in the code cracking department with the British military.
He looked a lot like Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, they made a movie. Yeah, that's right. Benedict Cumberbatch played him in the movie a couple of years ago called The Imitation Game, which is all about him. But he kind of saw the direction that technology was moving. He saw what computers could do even in just his day in the 40s. And he recognized at some point things are going to get so complicated that a machine is going to be able to pass as human. And so he developed something that is now called the Turing test, which is basically if a computer passes the Turing test, then it is indistinguishable from a human being by another human being. So basically, like, Garrett, if you had person A and person B, or subject, let's say subject A and subject B that you're talking to online. One of them's a computer and one of them is me, and you can't tell which is which. Then the computer has passed the Turing test because it's generating enough responses and whatever that would look like to convince you. It's very similar to this Voight-Kampff. Well, no, it's similar in its intent to this Voight-Kampff test from Blade Runner, right? Where that's trying to figure out if these things are actually things or if they're actually alive. But that doesn't necessarily, that still wouldn't pass the definition that you gave us, Garrett, about emotions being central, of course.
I don't even know how to respond to that because it was just like above my level of thinking a little bit. But I think I get where you're coming from.
Basically, yeah. I think I understand where you're given, these two subjects, one's talking to you, the other's talking to you. If you can't tell the difference between the two, you pass that particular test. Yeah. And here in Blade Runner, we have the Voight-Kampff test to gauge emotions because we're already past that point to, okay, we're talking, we can't distinguish if you're real or a robot. We have to take it one step farther.
Yeah, all of the replicants pass the Turing test.
Yeah.
People don't have any idea. They could be standing right next to them. They could be sleeping with them, and they had no idea.
They don't even know they're replicants.
This is why I'm terrified of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another movie where we have to talk about freaking AI.
Yeah, you and Elon Musk. And everybody who's thinking about it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something I think about on a regular basis, but when it comes up, I just... I don't like it.
Well, here's a question, though. Does it bother you when you use something like Siri on your phone? Or
See, I don't use it.
Or an Amazon? Or, are you against it? Or
I'm not against it. I just I prefer to do things. I prefer typing things in. I prefer looking it up in a book. I don't like the idea of relying on technology for my every need.
Hey, fair enough.
That and voice to text just does not work out in my favor usually.
Same.
Yeah. I disabled that on my phone, and I'm not sure how to fix it. So I'm just
gotcha.
living life in the dark ages. So.
But there's
the other
nothing
day,
wrong with that.
yeah, the other day I accidentally tried to order Chinese food when I was sending a text message to my mom, and it just didn't work out very well. And of course, I have one of the Amazon Echo Dots, the same type of thing, and I'll be like, okay, give me today's news, and it'll be like something way off topic from that, and they're like, did you say you want egg foo young? What? No.
Okay, I do use that though. I have the little
that's
remote
handy.
for the Fire Stick, and I just say, "What's the weather today?" So I know how to dress.
Sure. I like it's handy, but it's different than relying on it.
Yeah.
It's certainly different than having it go and fight your wars for you or go and discover things for you, which is what the replicants are doing in Blade Runner, right? They're being used as they're
Is
being
that
used
what
almost
they're
like
for?
Yeah, it's really
could
not all
not
that clear in
figure
the
it
movie.
out.
is it?
I had to look that up myself because I'm like,
The book is much clearer on this.
I stopped. Yeah, I was paying attention as much as I could, and in the middle of the night after driving for 4.5 hours.
Sure.
Party animal.
And so I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, they're exploratory. Oh, they're doing things that humans can't do.
Yeah, I think it vaguely mentions it in that little text crawl at the beginning, but it's not really all that clear.
It's
But
like
I
one
missed
sentence.
half of that.
The idea is that they're basically slaves. They're doing the things that nobody else wants to do. They're going to new worlds, and they're farming, and they're moving rocks and whatnot. And so it's no surprise that they're not real happy about it when they get although they're not happy about anything because they can't be happy. So it's a little unclear about that.
So one thing that I wanted to bring up, and you took us right to it. Why didn't the people just make machines with singular functions that work together, rather than the one the winner take all thing that can destroy humanity? Why don't we just make it like an assembly line where we have different components that work together that can't think for themselves, so
Well,
we don't die?
I think part of that is just humanity's want to play God. They want to see what they can create, and they want to see how far they can push the envelope, and then it normally F's them over.
It's kind of like that Frankenstein, the power to
Exactly.
create. Right?
Whether you should or you shouldn't do it is beside the point.
And I think in Blade Runner, you kind of see. I just read the book too, so I'm really trying to separate the two in my mind. But in the movie Blade Runner, because it's coming out of the early '80s, there's this real strong anti-corporate, anti-capitalist sort of vibe that I'm getting out of it. So you have kind of this evil corporation that's just trying to. But you can't really finish that sentence because I guess they're trying to make money, but it's not really clear how improving the realism of the androids would make them more money. But because that whole thing's just kind of left to the side. It's just kind of, well, that's the guy at the top. He must be evil or something, or at least
Stick
not
it to the
complete.
man.
Yeah, exactly. They're not really. They don't need to flesh that out because, well, he's the guy in charge, so he must just be bad. He plays chess. He gets his head crushed. That's all we really know
that
about
scene.
him. That was
Woof.
pretty rough, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was just sitting there the entire time. Wait, what? Why? Oh. I couldn't.
But I think that by having these, so here's there's a distinction when we talk about AI. There's a philosopher named John Searle who makes a distinction between two different kinds of AI. He says weak AI and strong AI. Weak AI is basically what we have when we talk about Siri or Alexa or something like that. Where you give the machine basic commands, and then it has a complex series of algorithms that figures out how to do what you want it to do. But you don't give it extremely explicit commands. You just kind of give it general ideas. And then so there's a little bit of, I'm going to use intelligence in air quotes here because we need to talk more about what intelligence counts as. But weak AI uses a little bit of some kind of algorithmic process to do something. Strong AI is like what you have in the movie here, where you've got a complete set of not just algorithms, but well, I guess it is algorithms, but they're creating something entirely new that we could call consciousness. I mean, that's what Pris thinks when she's quoting Descartes. When she says, "I think, therefore I am." That's Descartes' famous I always say this wrong, but it's the cogito ergo sum. Which did we talk about that in the Matrix?
We
podcast?
talked about that in the
Pretty
Matrix.
sure.
That was a while ago.
This entire thing is just bringing me back to the Matrix, and all I can think is, here we go again.
So Jenny watched this with me last night, and she had not seen it before. When she was a philosophy major in college, and she said that in her logic class they just constantly talked about this movie. She never had the desire to go watch it.
Not after that.
If The Matrix is the number one movie in philosophy classes, especially right now, Blade Runner is going to be competing for the number 2 spot. Because it deals with the philosophy of mind, and it deals with ideas about consciousness and what counts as consciousness. And that's what Descartes' talking about, right, with the cogito. But John Searle, he gives this really interesting example to differentiate between weak AI and strong AI. It's called the Chinese room. So, okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea.
The line, if you want to sound really, really smart, you can...
Ooh, teach me.
You just you can ask someone if they think that syntax is sufficient for semantics or not.
It sounds like the assignments that we would have in English when our teacher wanted to punish us.
Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah. So basically, Searle disagrees with the idea. He says syntax is not sufficient for semantics. Syntax is the order of like the order of words in a sentence. Is that all you need in order for there to be meaning in the sentence? In order for it to actually, mean something? Or does there have to be more than that? So the example he gives is, he says basically, imagine that I go into a room, and inside this room there are just walls and walls and walls of books and file cabinets and paper and pencils and everything that I would need to translate Chinese characters and to respond to Chinese characters.
Okay.
So you write some Chinese characters on a piece of paper and slip it under the door. And using all of the information in the room, I figure out what Chinese characters need to be written on a piece of paper to slide back under the door to respond to you. I don't know Chinese, but under that, if I had all of that information, I could make it look like I understand Chinese. But Searle says, I still would not understand Chinese. Basically, it's what you said earlier, Garrett, with them giving the appearance of having emotions, but they don't really have it, so it doesn't really count. Just having the algorithm or having the idea isn't enough, Searle says, in order for you to really be thinking, in order for you to really have intelligence. So that's the question. Do computers genuinely understand information, or do they merely simulate that understanding?
Gotcha. So that makes me think of Watson from Jeopardy.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what we're talking about? The super robot that competed on Jeopardy?
No, this is a thing?
This was a thing, yeah.
Such a gimmick, but it totally worked. It was
I
fascinating.
was
So intrigued. For those of you that know, I love me some Jeopardy.
Why I'm surprised that you've never heard about it. Let's talk about it real quick.
Second only to Ken Jennings, I think it's probably one of the most interesting things that Jeopardy's ever done.
Yeah, it was a computer from IBM. It did what they called Deep QA project, or it was the Deep QA project. It competed on Jeopardy against Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter. And let's take a look at the Wikipedia page real quick.
My life.
Watson had access to 200 million pages of structured and unstructured content, consuming 4 terabytes of disk storage, including the full text of Wikipedia. But it wasn't connected to the internet during the game, so it didn't have that as a resource. For
only
each
to be
clue, Watson's 3 most probable responses were displayed on the television screen. Watson consistently outperformed its human opponents on the game's signaling device, but had trouble in a few categories, notably those having short clues containing only a few words. So I'm guessing that a lot of maybe a before and after type of category or anything like that, it would probably have a little bit of trouble coming together, and it's where a little bit of outside the box thinking and maybe a little bit of art experience, puns,
that kind of thing,
anything like that.
I love me a good pun.
Would a computer be able to understand it?
So that's where it comes in, and that's where it was having trouble. So I mean, it had all the information, but it didn't have the ability to piece
Creative
it together.
thinking.
No creative thinking, no problem solving. Well, it had problem solving, just not like the analytical abstract thought that was required to put everything together into the correct answer. So,
but then the question that you have to ask is, does Watson know that information, or does Watson merely have access to that information? And is there a meaningful difference between those two things even?
well, this is where
Oh dear.
yeah,
That's the whole question. That's the Chinese room question. That's the whole question with the replicants on a even more broader level. But
let's just go back to this one point where it says the top 3 probable answers are sitting there in front of Watson, and it has to choose the correct one. So knowing which of the 3 probable answers is it programmed to just pick the most likely, or is it programmed to develop its own thoughts on okay, this is more likely than the other one, even though the research says this one is more probable basic fact. It has to kind of distinguish between those options. And that's where it gets hard. I don't know how it was all put together. I don't know. I still feel like it only had access to the correct answers, but it wasn't 100% sure that that's what it was.
I mean, that's exactly the same reason why I will tell my students that being able to look something up on their phone doesn't count. I mean, yes, you have access to the knowledge, but that is different than actually knowing it, being able to understand it, apply it in more ways than just what you're reading off the screen in front of you. I mean, that has merit, obviously. I mean, we literally just did it to find information about Watson.
Wikipedia.
But that is...
We're not sponsored, by the way.
I completely agree that knowledge, there is something deeper to it than that, and something more... Well, I like the idea of creative. That's one thing that in a lot of the science fiction movies dealing with artificial intelligence is that one of the things that sets robots apart from humans is that we generally are going to say that robots, they can't be creative, or that they're not creative, or when they start to become creative is when we start to wonder if they aren't surpassing their technological limits at some point.
I was just going to say, and I think in Blade Runner you see that a lot. The replicates aren't really that creative. They're just kind of doing their thing. I don't think I ever saw Rachel do something that was mind-blowing, or, oh my gosh, I'm going to create this. It was always just kind of I know all these things.
Yeah, and the emotional connections with Blade Runner seems to focus more on emotions than on creativity. They're very closely related, but I'm still skeptical. I know that she tells Deckard that she loves him after Deckard tells her that he loves her. So maybe she's just parroting the response back.
So is it real love, or is
Polly
Harrison
Wanacracker?
Ford just a pervert?
Well, I mean, again, after that kiss, it's really hard for me to see him in this movie as anything other than that.
It's just creep.
Well, okay, that's not fair. Harrison Ford, I mean,
He was
he's his own
acting.
guy. He was acting as a pervert.
Yes, Rick Deckard. You're right. Rick Deckard.
So, while you guys were mentioning that, I have a few answers about Watson on
good.
Jeopardy. What it does is it breaks everything up into keywords and sentence fragments in order to find statistically related phrases that might be the answer, and then it kind of overlays what could be the answer with the actual answers to see which one might be it. So the more algorithms that find the same answer independently, the more likely Watson is to be correct. And then the problem that it had was that it had no frame of reference or context that the human players had. And that's where the shortfall was. I mean, of course, it could hit the buzzer quicker than humans. I mean, it's like, it's okay, eat. And then, but it wasn't able to process. And then it also couldn't keep up with the game's tactics with the human element where, you know, they'd switch categories and like, oh, this is in a different database. This is, you know. So, I mean, it worked, but we're still looking at a machine.
Quick question. Was Watson able to answer in the form of a question?
I'm pretty sure that was written into the algorithm because definitely was not disqualified.
What is Abraham Lincoln?
Well, he's a guy who liked pudding, I'm assuming.
You know, I'm still not convinced. And again, this is from somebody who grew up watching Star Trek. Star Trek: The Next Generation had an android as one of the main characters, Data, played by Brent Spiner. I mean, a fantastic character who you really empathize with because he is an android who wants to be human, and he's constantly going on this journey to try and become more human. And yet, he gets a pet. He does actually create things. Kind of. I mean, it's a little unclear if it still counts. We can ask the question, but he plays music and things, and he's a brilliant. I think he plays the violin, if I remember right. He's a brilliant violinist, but is
that
you would
just
expect him to be able to do that in the same way that I expect my iPod to be able to play a song really well.
Well, it comes right down to the base word. Is it replicating or is it original composition?
Exactly. I was about to say, is it regurgitating information?
Yeah.
Or is it-
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite phrases.
That's a good word here.
Or is it coming up with something new and original?
And when
Which I think is the whole point of this podcast. There is nothing new or original.
Well, yeah, I suppose it is a bit ironic, but even that, the way that stories recombine generation by generation, it's not always the same. There are similar elements to it, but even just when you look at Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and compare it to Blade Runner, honestly, if I didn't know that the two were intentionally related, if they didn't have similar character names and things, the stories are very different. I mean, I like Dick's book because it deals a lot with religion. Actually, that's one of the main themes in that book. Is this worldwide religion that the humans all kind of not obsess over, but everybody follows this religion, but the androids can't really grasp onto it. And one of the big parts of the climax in the book is when these androids kind of reveal that the religion is kind of a fraud. And all of that stuff's not in Blade Runner. So
Yeah.
When we're creating new things, they're not identical. It's not regurgitation. It's it has been mixed up, and I'm not going to try and follow out that metaphor anymore. But and especially when you get to the emotions. I mean, like you said, the big thing with Blade Runner isn't just that they're creating, but it's that they're feeling things. Are they really? Or I mean, you can ask Siri to tell you that she loves you, but I even feel weird talking about Siri in personal pronouns.
This isn't her.
Yeah.
It.
When you
No, I'm talking about the movie Her.
Oh, I get you.
same idea, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Falling in love with an
questions.
operating system, yeah.
So the question, or no, not the question. The word that philosophers use to kind of grasp onto what you're talking about is intentionality. The intentionality of a word is the aboutness of it. It's the connection that it has to the world, and some people are going to hold that up as the thing that is different. I mean, it is possible if you had a bag of blocks, you could shake them all up and pour them out. And if the blocks all had letters on them, then they might randomly assemble themselves into an order that would look like a word. But it wouldn't be about anything. It wouldn't be directed towards communicating any kind of information. Intentionality in this philosophical, epistemological sense is the aboutness. Like when you say a word, what do you mean? What are you trying to communicate? And when we're talking about emotions, when I say I love you, or I'm angry, or I'm sad, Are we just describing? I think you're right, Garrett, to say that we are describing more than just a series of hormones and chemicals and physical responses that come from that. I mean, but then again, I'm a mind-body dualist, or something closer to that than a physicalist.
Alrighty.
Which is basically saying that the mind and the body are different things, and the physicalist is going to say that you are simply your body.
Gotcha.
I
Well,
don't like that. I don't want to be my body.
I mean, I like my body, but I think that there are certain things that you can say about the mind that you can't just say about the brain.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Where does the conscience come in? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
what we believe is morally right, as opposed to like just the most probable survivalist answer.
Yeah. Well, what did you think about the C-beam speech? This is going to be one of the most famous parts of this movie. Roy Batty's death knell. Let me just read it real fast while you're collecting your thoughts.
Do it. I have thoughts, but I want to hear it again.
Yeah, he says...
Refresh my memory.
They're on the roof. It's in the rain. He's got a dove for some unexplained reason. And he says, I mean, for as weird as it is with him in his underwear, I do think it is one of the most beautiful, like, 3 sentences that you're going to find in a science fiction movie. He says, "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. Time to die."
It's one of those things where I like it, especially since it's not the only time that you hear "Time to Die" in the movie, but it's meant in a totally different way, where there's not really a death immediately associated with it. Never mind.
No. Explain yourself.
I'm trying to think of how I could put this together in words.
What were you going to say, Garrett?
I really like how when Deckard is explaining it later, how he says that might have been the moment when he felt the most human. Or wait, that wasn't it. It was he really loved life, not just his life, but all life. Mm-hmm. And that was possibly the reason that he saved him. Because honestly, we don't know, if that makes sense. Like, we could have thoughts and stuff, but, he has a brain, and we don't know what's going on in it. I think, personally, it was that moment of he just really realized how much he loved life because it was the last moment that he would have it.
Yeah, but I do have to hate that on principle just because it was in the god-awful voiceover.
That was a pretty awful voiceover.
So, I mean, just everything that Harrison Ford says in the voiceover, I just cringe. But I appreciate what you're saying.
But I think that's just could be he felt the most human in that instant.
Yeah, but is he just, again, simulating that feeling? See, I think the thing that really
Freaking
resonates...
AI, I hate it.
The thing that resonates with me about that is that whether he is an AI or not, or let's just say that he is... Oh, okay, that was a dumb way to phrase that.
This is going to be like the worst part of the podcast. It's just, I don't know.
Whether he is human or not, whether he counts as being alive or not, what he says is still true. I mean, Deckard could say it, although there's some questions about there. But, I mean, any human, you could say that, right? Before you die. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. It's...
How poetic.
Well, honestly, it is. And a little sidebar, Rutger Hauer... ad-libbed that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, amazing. He
Good
had
on
a
him.
script. It was about, you look at the script, it's like half similar, but especially that last line, that was all him. Really beautiful stuff there. But that's true for anybody, right? I mean, if your consciousness ends at death, then, well, period. That's it. That's the end of the story, right? Everything's going to be lost like tears in the rain. And granted, there are a lot. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I do kind of wish that Blade Runner could have incorporated more of the religious elements from the source novel, because that's one of the big ideas in a lot of religions, is that life does not end at death. But can't be everything.
See, I would have never gotten any of the religion stuff from the movie.
Oh yeah,
They
it's
just didn't put
just
it in
not there. It's really not there. There's this whole religion in the book called Mercerism, where people have these boxes that they grab onto, and they all kind of like mind meld together, and they feel the emotions of all the other people who are mind melding at the same time. Yeah, nothing like that in the movie at all, which is unfortunate. But
I'm just wondering if they had put something like that in the movie, if it would have helped me understand it, and or give me more sort of interest.
In the book, it's one of the ways that the androids are separated from the humans, because the androids can't mind meld with everybody else. But that's actually one of the major plot lines in the book, is that, and then I think this is one thing where the book does improve on the story rather than the movie's version. The motivation of the androids in the movie is kind of base, I think. Like they want to not die. I mean, I understand that. That makes sense. But in the movie, it's just about them. In the book, the androids are like on this mission to try and improve life, not just for themselves, but for all androids, by revealing that this big thing for humans is actually false. By proving that the religion is not true, they are trying to cast doubt on the idea of emotions entirely. And they're trying to say, you claim to have emotions, but how do we know that that's really real? Kind of putting the shoe on the other foot, saying, you claim that we lack these emotions, but how do we know that you're not just making it all up? And that would have been fascinating to see.
Sounds like such a better movie.
It would have been so cool, but it would have also been, I think, really hard to indicate a lot of that in the movie in a believable sort of way. So I understand why.
Without just saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Without just giving a lot of the exposition, more of that horrible voiceover, something like that. I do think in there. What, Bobby? Did you find what you were looking for?
Yeah, I did. So earlier in the movie, when Decker gets attacked by Leon.
Yes.
He tells Decker, time to die before his head explodes. Because Rachel, Rachel shoots him in the head to save Decker.
What a queen.
But yeah, I mean, it was there was intent behind the time to die, and now we go back we go forward in the movie, and we see Roy on the rooftop when he says "time to die," and it's not. It's a total different context, and it was one of the things that kind of made me think of Watson. In the context, there's multiple meanings. There's the connotation and denotation. Mm-hmm. Granted, the denotation is the same, but the context is totally different. They're using it in a different way, and I feel like the second time around, it's a lot more emotional rather than it's a fact. Somebody's going to die right now.
Yeah, the symbolism is interesting, and that it does kind of play with the intentionality we were saying earlier, because it is very different. I mean, the intentionality with Leon is that when he says those words, yeah, it is time for you to die. But I mean, there is a death immediately associated with Roy's comment, but it's just not a murder.
It's not a murder, and it's more along the lines of you see your own impending doom.
This is making me sad. I feel like sad over a robot person thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of one of the end games of this movie, I feel like.
I mean, I didn't feel sad last night when I was watching it, but now talking about it and thinking about it, I'm like, aw.
Yes. Yeah. Why do you think that Roy saved Deckard? Other than to make an awesome climax and to have that brilliant
And he didn't let
monologue.
go of the bird the entire time.
That apparently was also Rutger Hauer's idea, so maybe he's not entirely...
I'm sorry. I'm one of those people when I'm watching a movie that I sit there and I'm like, but why do you have this? Like, something is happening right here that you're supposed to be paying attention to, but I'm paying attention to something completely random that I just don't understand is happening.
It is. Now, I will say, if having just read the book, I was a little more impressed with it, because there's this thing in the book where all animals are dead.
Oh.
Or almost all animals are dead. It's like because the nuclear fallout has caused almost every species to go extinct.
Well,
And
yeah,
Is
then we
that what
have
was
the,
going on?
Yeah, they kind of hint at it in the movie when they talk about fake animals.
The fake snakes.
The fake snake. And
Yeah.
when he has the owl, or he sees the owl and asks if it's
Yeah.
real, and she says, of course not. They hint at it. But that's why the book is called what it is, because Deckard has an electric sheep because his real sheep died, but it's like a big status symbol to have an animal. So if you don't have a real one, then you can pay to have a cheap fake version.
Does that mean everybody in this story is a vegan?
Basically, yeah. I mean,
Soylent.
if you were listening, if you were listening carefully to the questions that he asks in the Voight-Kampff test, those are all of that dialogue is taken almost directly from the book, and a lot of it has to do with animal skins or things like that.
Sorry, I was too busy thinking, how long is that cigarette going to last, Rachel?
Oh yeah, seriously. But the having just read the book, him having a bird out of nowhere, if it's a real bird, then there is some kind of heavy symbolism to that. Like
that
you were
makes
saying a
sense.
minute ago about life and appreciating life, and he has this living thing there with him. So, but they don't ever really play it up in the movie enough. In none of the cuts. That's not something that really comes back into the director's cut or the final cut. So
Yeah, I think the only difference in that scene would be like it was raining and then the rain stops and then you see the dove fly away, and as opposed to it just stays
I
raining
thought it was
and the
just
dove flies
like,
away.
and then his life left him like the bird, but he was an android, so he doesn't really.
He expired.
he expired. There is a nice little Story Cauldron-esque sort of reference in that book, or not book, in that line when he talks about the Tannhauser Gate. It's a little it's hard to say for sure, but there is a myth, a story about a German poet, kind of musician-ish guy named Tannhauser, and Wagner made an opera about Tannhauser. I don't know if this was an intentional sort of reference, but in the Tannhauser opera, it's all about this this poet who is, well, and not just the opera. Come to think of it, it's the whole myth. This poet is seduced away from his love. He goes to seek forgiveness and does not find it. And when he leaves, the person that he tries to seek forgiveness from gives like indicates that he should actually forgive Tannhauser, and so he goes to try and find Tannhauser, but it's too late. Tannhauser's returned back to where he had gone off to, and he never receives that forgiveness. So the idea of losing something that you deserve, this kind of tragic loss, I can see some connections there with Roy's speech, with what he's and kind of his whole character. The idea that he wants to be human, but he's about to die, and even though maybe he might even deserve it based on, he just saved a guy's life. Mm-hmm. Or did he? I mean, we're almost out of time, so we really need to ask the big question, right?
Oh, go for it.
The big Blade Runner question, which, if you've only seen the theatrical version, this might sound kind of weird, but what do you think the chances are that Deckard is a replicant?
Dum dum dum. Yeah.
Oh, I should have taken a picture of your face, Garrett, because it's brilliant right now. This is the big thing that you see in the director's cut, and by the time the final cut was made, it's all but explicit. Think about some of the hints throughout the movie about like the fact that replicants love pictures for no apparent reason, and Deckard's got all these pictures all over the place. Rachel asks him, or Rachel or Eldon, one of the Tyrells, asks him if he's ever done the Voight-Kampff test, and he doesn't respond. He doesn't answer the question.
And it's one of those things that you hear about whenever somebody brings up the idea of Blade Runner. It's that immortal question. And then you'll see that, I guess I'm bringing in the new movie a little bit too much, but...
I wonder how they're going to handle that with the sequel.
The sequel. Because that's one of the things that I was really thinking of when the sequel came out. I was like, okay, we see Harrison Ford in the trailer, but what
Maybe he's a new model
going on?
Because honestly, in the thing that they added in the director's cut, you remember when he's playing the piano and he kind of falls asleep? He actually falls asleep, and he has this dream of a unicorn running in the forest. And you remember the creepy guy who doesn't really speak English, Edward James Olmos? Did you know
Yeah.
that was Edward James Olmos?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's making all these little like matchstick figures and little origami things. He's the one that left the little origami thing at the end. Remember what it was?
A unicorn.
Yeah. So people talk about whether that's supposed to indicate the same sort of thing that Deckard indicated when he was telling Rachel all of her memories about the spider and things like that. Does Gaff, that's that guy's name, Gaff, does he know about Deckard's memories because Deckard is does he know about Deckard's dreams because Deckard is a replicant himself?
This is some conspiracy theory-ish, and I don't want any part of it.
I think this is why Blade Runner really became the fixture that it is in science fiction, because people love to talk about this kind of thing.
Freaking Anthony! Now I have to go and watch the new one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy because it leaves it open and like, we've got to figure this out. But there's that question, and then there's the question of because in some of the other versions, it doesn't really. I don't think it tells you that Rachel has an expiration date.
Oh yeah, that she doesn't have one. Yeah, that's one of the horrible things in that last scene that makes no sense with everything else in the movie. Like the theatrical version, I looked it up. That all that footage of the countryside that they're driving through, that was leftover footage from The Shining that wasn't used. But the studio basically said this movie needs a happy ending, so they just threw that in there and made the voiceover say, for no sensible reason, she's special, she's not gonna die.
It doesn't say that she's not going to die. It just says they don't know if she's going to die.
That's true.
Yeah.
He just says, I don't know how much time we have, which I agree is still stupid, but I'm going to correct you.
Yes, we need to be precise. And so that is not in any of the other ones.
Yeah,
either.
so I'm like, okay, does that...
Which is such a better story.
I feel like that
I
that was a cop-out and that cheapened the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
And-
I'm not happy about her dying, but it's...
Yeah.
It's better than
It's
fame.
a better
I'm gonna
story.
live forever.
So, yeah, we're coming up on the end of the hour, and I just wanted to leave everybody with a few thoughts that this is one of the only movies about robots and stuff like that where I never really saw Asimov's 3 laws of robotics.
Oh, where they didn't talk about it?
Where they didn't talk about it or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people have, if you've seen, like, what was it, iRobot and...
We'll have to do iRobot so we can talk about the 3 laws more.
But I'm just going to, like, pull it up real quick because it's something that I feel like most people know about today. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to become harmed. A robot must obey the orders given by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So basically, they're not supposed to hurt humans at all. Time to die.
Yeah, that would totally... I mean, if that had been a thing in Philip K. Dick's world, this story wouldn't really have happened.
Yeah, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a comforting thought on our end, at least.
Oh, yeah. See, Elon Musk just... as if he hasn't read Isaac Asimov. But that's... what are we so worried about? What are we so... I mean, we'll just put these rules in. There's no possible way that anything could ever go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying like it's a hard, fast law and stuff like that, because I mean, there's plenty of movies out there that we will in later episodes talk about. Yeah. But it's one of those things that gets brought up quite a bit with robot movies. And
so, last thing, would you recommend this to anybody? Wait.
I'm going to be honest. When I came in here, I wanted to hate on this movie so hard, and then we had an actual discussion, and you've turned me. Now I actually want to look into it more and watch the next one.
Hey, well,
so thanks.
You're welcome. The next one does have Ryan Gosling in it, if that helps. It helps my wife. So,
I would recommend this movie to some people, but not all people. Maybe someone who really wants to feel smart and do some research on it. But if you're not going to put in the time and effort, then don't worry about it.
Gotcha.
Or if you're not gonna, I would
That's
say
my thoughts and feelings because I'm not a robot.
I would say if you don't even necessarily care about that, if you just want to see Harrison Ford get beat up and then kill a bunch of people, because did you notice that every single one of the robots except for Rachel gets the drop on him?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good action movie.
He's a crappy replicant.
That's it. Yeah. Honestly, that's yeah. I don't get that.
Yeah.
No.
But I don't know, and I guess I would.
Boy.
I'd recommend it to those who are interested into some awesome world building and some awesome visual effects, because there's plenty of that in there.
Yeah. Again, the cinematography is award winning for a reason. It's brilliant to think that they made all of this without digital effects.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Can't say that for the Blade Runner 2049 because that was totally digital, but
I'm still looking forward to that. I mean, hey, any movie with Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling is a movie I'm going to see. And the fact that this one is Blade Runner, directed by, oh my God, the same director who made Arrival, which is the most beautiful science fiction movie of the last few decades. I'm excited for Blade Runner 2049.
Can we all go see it together?
Let's do it.
Oh my gosh, with all the popcorn?
Melissa wants to go see it, kind of. She told me that she'd watch anything with Ryan Gosling. So.
that man.
Yeah. Man.
God bless him.
That's right. That's right. I don't think. See, we've gotten to peak Gosling, so I think we need to cut it here.
Yeah, true. All right. So with that, thanks for joining us today on the Story Cauldron. The music from this episode is from the band Hook Sounds.
And don't forget to tell us what you think on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and at our website, thestorycauldron.com.
And don't forget to go rate and leave a comment on our iTunes. It helps other people find our podcast. And then also just share with your friends, because it makes us all feel nice and warm and fuzzy.
Because we're not replicants.
Not at all. We have emotions. Or do we?
Dun, dun, dun.
I can't.
All right. Well, until next time,
Bye.